From disastrous language mistakes caught too late to fix, to a future quantum leap star replacing Batman before he was Batman, and a corporate training film that teaches executives what not to do, Ron Howard's 1986 comedy hides some truly bizarre production secrets that will make you see this culture clash classic in a completely new light. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Gung Ho. Fact 1. Ron Howard's rookie mistake was unfixable. When director Ron Howard sat down years later to reflect on the making of Gung Ho, he openly admitted to one of the most embarrassing oversights of his career. Before casting began, Howard and his team never actually tested whether the Japanese-American actors they were hiring could speak Japanese fluently. They simply assumed that actors of Japanese descent would naturally be able to handle the dialogue. This turned out to be a massive miscalculation that would haunt the production. Many of the Japanese-American performers cast in the film were second- or third-generation Americans who had never learned to speak Japanese beyond a few basic phrases. The production did hire some native Japanese speakers for key roles, and it was these actors who eventually noticed something was terribly wrong. As filming progressed, the native speakers began pointing out that much of the Japanese dialogue being spoken by the Japanese-American cast was grammatically incorrect, poorly pronounced, or simply didn't make sense. But here's where the mistake became truly unfixable. By the time these concerns were brought to Howard's attention, the production had already completed roughly 90% of principal photography. Reshooting all those scenes would have blown the budget and pushed the release date back significantly. Howard and the producers made the difficult decision to move forward with what they had already filmed. The director has since described this as a rookie mistake, acknowledging that he should have been more careful during the casting process. For audiences who don't speak Japanese, the errors go completely unnoticed, but for fluent speakers watching the film, the dialogue issues are glaringly obvious and often distracting throughout the movie. Fact 2. Toyota uses it as a training film. While Gung Ho was intended as a lighthearted comedy about cultural misunderstandings in the workplace, it ended up serving a completely different purpose thousands of miles away from Hollywood. Toyota executives in Japan discovered the film and recognized something that American audiences might have missed. The movie perfectly illustrated numerous management mistakes and cultural insensitivities that could destroy a cross-cultural business relationship. Rather than dismissing it as just another Hollywood comedy, Toyota's corporate training department saw an opportunity. They began using Gung Ho as an educational tool in their management training programs. The film became required viewing for Japanese executives who were being prepared for assignments in the United States or other Western countries. During these training sessions, instructors would pause the movie at key moments to discuss what was going wrong and why. They would analyze scenes where the Japanese managers in the film failed to understand American workplace culture, where communication broke down due to language barriers, and where both sides made assumptions about each other based on stereotypes rather than reality. The trainers would then explain the correct approach to handling these situations. What makes this especially ironic is that the film's makers were trying to poke fun at both American and Japanese business cultures, creating exaggerated characters for comedic effect. Toyota, however, stripped away the comedy and focused purely on the lessons about what not to do. The movie became a case study in failed cross-cultural management, turning Ron Howard's comedy into mandatory corporate education material that is still referenced in international business discussions today. Fact 3. The cars were actually Fiats from Argentina. One of the central plot points of Gung Ho revolves around a Japanese auto manufacturer reopening a closed American factory to build Japanese cars for the American market. Throughout the film, we see workers assembling vehicles on the factory floor, and the movie goes to great lengths to make everything look authentic. However, the cars being built on screen weren't Japanese at all. They were actually Italian vehicles from South America. The production team faced a significant logistical challenge. They needed a real automotive factory with working assembly lines where they could film for extended periods without disrupting actual car production. Finding such a location in the United States proved nearly impossible, as American auto plants were either too busy or unwilling to allow a film crew to interrupt their operations. The solution came from an unexpected place. The production discovered a Fiat manufacturing facility in Argentina that had recently scaled back operations and had significant unused space. This plant became the primary filming location for all the factory scenes. The cars rolling off the assembly line in the movie are 1985 Fiat Regattas and 1986 Fiat Spazios, compact sedans that were popular in South American markets but rarely seen in the United States. The production team did their best to obscure the Fiat badges and make the vehicles look more generic, but sharp-eyed viewers who know their cars can spot the distinctive Italian styling. The irony is thick here. A movie about Japanese automotive manufacturing taking over American industry was actually filmed in a half-abandoned Italian factory in Argentina using cars that most American audiences had never heard of. Fact 4. It was loosely based on real events. While Gung Ho plays out as a comedy with exaggerated characters and situations, the basic premise of the film wasn't pulled from thin air. The screenwriters drew inspiration from real events that had unfolded just a few years earlier at an automotive plant in Fremont, California. This facility had originally been a General Motors assembly plant, but it had earned a notorious reputation throughout the 1970s as one of the worst-performing factories in the entire American auto industry. Worker absenteeism at the Fremont plant was extremely high, with some reports indicating that up to 20% of the workforce would simply not show up on any given day. The quality of vehicles coming off the assembly line was abysmal, and labor management relations were openly hostile. General Motors eventually gave up and closed the facility in 1982, putting thousands of people out of work. Then something remarkable happened. Toyota approached General Motors with a proposal to reopen the plant as a joint venture called NUMI, which stood for New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporated. The Japanese automaker would bring its production methods and management philosophy, while General Motors would provide the facility and rehire many of the same workers who had been there before. Industry experts were deeply skeptical, believing that the same workforce that had failed under GM would fail again. Instead, the NUMI plant became one of the most efficient automotive facilities in North America. The transformation of Fremont's workforce from worst to first became a business school case study and caught the attention of Hollywood. The screenwriters took this remarkable true story and fictionalized it, moving the setting to Pennsylvania and amping up the cultural conflicts for comedic effect. Fact 5. The title makes no sense for the story. The phrase Gung Ho has become so embedded in American English that most people use it without thinking about where it came from or what it originally meant. The term actually has Chinese origins, derived from the Mandarin phrase Gong He, which translates roughly to work together or work in harmony. The expression entered American military slang during World War II when a Marine Corps officer named Evans Carlson used it as a motto for his battalion after spending time observing Chinese Communist forces. Carlson's Raiders, as they became known, adopted Gung Ho as their battle cry, and the phrase quickly spread throughout the American military. Here's where things get awkward for this film. During World War II, the United States and Japan were enemies engaged in brutal combat across the Pacific theater. The Chinese phrase that American Marines were shouting as they fought against Japanese forces has now been attached to a movie about Japanese and American workers learning to cooperate in a factory. The irony is almost too perfect. A Chinese expression that became popular among Americans while fighting Japan is now the title of a film about Japanese-American workplace. Collaboration. Nobody involved in making the movie seems to have considered this historical disconnect, or if they did, they decided the phrase was too perfect to pass up because it captured the spirit of teamwork the film was trying to promote. The title works as a metaphor for cooperation and enthusiasm, which is certainly what the movie is about, but the specific historical and cultural origins of the phrase create an unintentional layer of irony that undermines the film's message about bridging cultural divides. Fact 6. It opened at number 1. Despite mixed reviews. When Gung Ho hit theaters on March 14, 1986, critics were divided about whether the film successfully balanced comedy with social commentary. Some reviewers praised the performances and found the culture clash humor effective, while others criticized the movie for relying too heavily on stereotypes and not digging deep enough into the serious economic issues it was touching on. Roger Ebert gave it 2.5 stars out of 4, acknowledging some funny moments but finding the whole thing rather shallow. Despite the mixed critical reception, audiences showed up in significant numbers. The film opened at number 1 at the box office during its first weekend, pulling in $7.17 million. That might not sound like a blockbuster by today's standards, but for a modestly budgeted comedy in 1986, it was a solid performance. The movie had essentially no competition from major action films or franchise releases that weekend, which certainly helped its chances. Gung Ho managed to stay in theaters throughout the spring and early summer, slowly building its total gross. By the time it finished its theatrical run, the film had earned approximately $36 million domestically. While that wasn't enough to crack the top 20 highest-grossing films of 1986, it was profitable enough that the studio considered it a success. The film's financial performance was strong enough to convince ABC that a television adaptation might work, leading to the short-lived sitcom that would premiere later that same year. For a comedy tackling economic anxiety and cross-cultural workplace tensions, Gung Ho performed well enough at the box office to be considered a minor hit, even if it never achieved the classic status of some of Ron Howard's other directorial efforts. Fact 7. Australia renamed it after a rock song. When distributors prepared to release Gung Ho in Australia and New Zealand, they faced an unusual problem. The title simply didn't resonate with audiences in those markets the same way it did in America. The phrase Gung Ho wasn't part of everyday Australian slang, and focus groups suggested that potential viewers had no idea what the title meant or whether it was even an English phrase. Rather than spending money on marketing to explain the title, distributors decided to rename the film entirely. They looked at the movie's soundtrack for inspiration and found their answer. Jimmy Barnes, one of Australia's most popular rock singers, had recorded a powerful anthem called Working Class Man that played over the film's end credits. This song had already been climbing the Australian charts for months before the movie's release, and Barnes was a household name across the country. The distributors decided to retitle the film Working Class Man for the Australian and New Zealand markets, hoping to capitalize on the song's existing popularity and create a clearer connection between the movie's themes and its new title. The strategy worked reasonably well, as Australian audiences immediately understood that the film would be about blue-collar workers facing economic challenges. The song and the movie became linked in the public consciousness, with each promoting the other. For Barnes, Working Class Man became his signature solo track and one of the defining songs of his career, even though it was written by Jonathan Cain of the band Journey. To this day, many Australians who remember the film know it only by the title Working Class Man, and some are genuinely surprised to learn that it was called something completely different in the United States. Fact 8. The TV series starred future Quantum Leap star Hollywood has a long history of adapting successful movies into television series, often with disappointing results. Gung Ho, the television series, fits squarely into that category, but it holds a special place in pop culture history for one significant reason. The show premiered on ABC in December of 1986, just 9 months after the movie had finished its theatrical run. The network brought back some of the supporting cast members from the film, but needed to replace Michael Keaton, who had no interest in committing to a weekly sitcom schedule. The producers cast a relatively unknown stage actor named Scott Bakula in the lead role of Hunt Stevenson, the character Keaton had played in the movie. At the time, this was Bakula's first major television role, and he was largely unfamiliar to American audiences. The show struggled from the beginning, never finding a consistent tone or building a loyal audience. ABC canceled it after just 9 episodes, and the series disappeared into obscurity. However, Bakula's career was just getting started. 3 years later, in 1989, he would land the role of Dr. Sam Beckett in the science fiction series Quantum Leap, which would run for 5 seasons and make him a television star. Quantum Leap earned Bakula 4 Emmy nominations and a Golden Globe Award, cementing his status as a leading man on television. Looking back, the failed Gung Ho series served as an important stepping stone in Bakula's career, giving him valuable experience as a television lead, even though the show itself was quickly forgotten by everyone except the most dedicated television historians. Fact 9. Clint Howard played. Different characters in each version. Clint Howard has built an entire career playing quirky character roles in dozens of films and television shows, often appearing in projects directed by his more famous older brother, Ron Howard. Gung Ho was no exception to this pattern. In the 1986 film, Clint plays a worker named Paul, one of the American factory employees dealing with the arrival of the new Japanese management. When ABC decided to adapt the movie into a television series later that same year, most of the American cast members from the film were replaced with television actors. The Japanese cast members largely returned to reprise their roles, but the American side of the factory saw almost entirely new faces. Except for Clint Howard, he became the only white American actor from the original film to appear in the television adaptation, but there was a twist. Rather than continuing to play Paul, the character he had portrayed in the movie, Howard was recast as a completely different character in the series. The producers apparently wanted him involved because of his connection to director Ron Howard, who served as an executive producer on the television show, but they decided to give him a different role rather than having him reprise his film character. This created an odd situation where viewers who had seen the movie just a few months earlier would recognize Howard's face but might be confused about why his character seemed different. The decision to recast him rather than simply bringing back his original character has never been fully explained, but it's likely that the television writers wanted more flexibility with the character dynamics and didn't want to be locked into the personality traits Paul had displayed in the film. Factor 10. Gary Watanabe reprised his film role on TV. While most of the American cast from the Gung Ho film was replaced when ABC adapted it into a television series, the Japanese side of the cast had a very different experience. Gary Watanabe, who played Kazuhiro Yamamoto in the original movie, returned to play the exact same character in the television adaptation. In fact, Watanabe wasn't alone. The majority of the Japanese actors who had appeared in the film came back to reprise their roles for the small screen version. This created an unusual situation where the show had strong continuity on one side of the cultural divide, but felt completely different on the American side. The decision to bring back the Japanese cast while replacing almost all of the American actors was likely driven by several practical factors. First, there simply weren't as many Japanese or Japanese-American actors working in Hollywood at the time, so the producers probably wanted to maintain relationships with performers who had already proven they could handle the material. Second, the Japanese characters in both the film and the series required actors who could speak Japanese convincingly, which limited the pool of available talent. Finally, bringing back familiar faces from the film gave the television series at least some connection to the movie that had inspired it, even though the show had a very different lead actor and a completely restructured supporting cast on the American side. For Watanabe, the role was just another entry in a career that had already included memorable performances in films like 16 Candles, where he had played the controversial character Long Duk Dong. The Gung Ho series didn't last long enough to significantly boost his profile, but it demonstrated his versatility and commitment to roles that explored Japanese-American identity during a period when Hollywood offered few such opportunities. Fact 11. It was Michael Keaton's pre-Batman comedy era. Looking back at Michael Keaton's career trajectory makes the timing of Gung Ho even more interesting. In 1986, Keaton was still firmly planted in the comedy genre, known primarily for playing fast-talking, energetic characters in films that ranged from silly to satirical. Gung Ho arrived right in the middle of what we can now see as his pure comedy period. Just 2 years earlier, he had starred in Johnny Dangerously, a mob comedy spoof that showcased his gift for physical humor and rapid-fire dialogue. 2 years after Gung Ho, he would take on the role of the mischievous ghost in Beetlejuice, directed by Tim Burton, which would become one of the defining comedic performances of the 1980s. Then came 1989, when everything changed. Tim Burton shocked the entertainment industry by casting Keaton as Batman, a decision that triggered immediate backlash from fans who couldn't imagine the comedian from Mr. Mom wearing the cape and cowl. Thousands of letters poured into Warner Brothers protesting the choice. Comic book fans organized campaigns demanding that Keaton be replaced with someone more traditionally heroic. The controversy became national news, but Burton stood by his decision, and when Batman finally hit theaters, Keaton's performance silenced most critics. He brought a darkness and intensity to the role that nobody had expected, proving he could handle dramatic material as effectively as comedy. Looking back at Gung Ho now, it's hard not to see it as one of the last gasps of Keaton's comedy-only era, a final example of the type of role he would soon leave behind as his career evolved into something much more complex and unpredictable. Fact 12. The Japanese subtitle translation was wrong. Movies that include foreign language dialogue face a constant challenge: how to accurately translate that dialogue for audiences who don't speak the language. Subtitles have to convey not just the literal words being spoken, but also the cultural context and emotional subtext. Sometimes, though, the subtitles simply get it wrong. Gung Ho contains at least one significant subtitle error that changes the meaning of a scene for Mamuportei, English-speaking viewers. Early in the film, there's a sequence set in Japan at a corporate training facility where workers are being drilled on company loyalty and work ethic. During one particularly intense moment, an English subtitle appears on screen indicating that a Japanese worker is mentioning his family as part of his commitment to the company. The subtitle suggests he's talking about working hard to provide for his wife and children, which fits the stereotype of the devoted Japanese salaryman sacrificing everything for his family's future. However, viewers who actually speak Japanese have pointed out that the dialogue doesn't match the subtitle at all. What the worker actually says in Japanese is a formal apology combined with a promise to work harder and not disappoint the company again. There's no mention of family whatsoever. He's apologizing for a perceived failure and pledging his loyalty to the organization, but the personal family angle that the subtitle adds simply isn't there in the original dialogue. This kind of error can happen for various reasons. Sometimes translators add context they think will help Western audiences understand Japanese workplace culture. Other times, subtitles are created quickly without proper review by native speakers. Whatever the cause, this particular mistranslation adds a layer of meaning that wasn't intended and reinforces stereotypes about Japanese work culture that the actual dialogue doesn't support. Fact 13. It features a blatant softball rules violation. Sports movies frequently bend or break the actual rules of the games they're depicting for dramatic purposes, hoping that most viewers won't notice or won't care. Gung Ho includes one particularly egregious example during what's supposed to be the emotional climax of the film. Near the end of the movie, the Japanese and American workers play a softball game that's meant to symbolize their growing cooperation and mutual respect. The game comes down to a crucial moment when a fly ball is hit toward the outfield. A Japanese character named Saito positions himself under the ball to make the catch, which would result in an out. But Buster, one of the American workers, comes charging in and physically runs into Saito just as he's about to catch the ball, causing him to drop it. The American team treats this as a successful play, and the movie presents it as a moment of triumph. Here's the problem. What Buster does is textbook interference, a clear violation of softball rules. A base runner is not allowed to deliberately interfere with a fielder who is attempting to make a play on the ball. When interference occurs, the base runner should be called out immediately, and if it's particularly blatant, additional runners can be called out as well. The play should have ended right there with an out against the American team. Instead, the movie treats it as a legitimate play, and neither the characters nor the film itself acknowledge that anything wrong has happened. It's possible the filmmakers simply didn't know the rule, or they decided that having the play called correctly would disrupt the emotional flow of the scene. Either way, anyone familiar with softball rules watching this scene will immediately recognize the violation. Fact 14. The pizza place continuity error. Continuity errors are among the most common mistakes in filmmaking, occurring when details change between shots or scenes in ways that don't make logical sense. Most of these errors are minor and go unnoticed by casual viewers, but Gung Ho contains one that's particularly noticeable once you spot it. The error involves pizza and a local restaurant. At one point in the film, the character Hunt Stevenson mentions in dialogue that the local pizza place has closed down. He specifically says it closed yesterday, emphasizing how quickly the town's economy is collapsing and how few businesses are surviving. This detail is meant to reinforce the desperate economic situation facing the community and raise the stakes for getting the auto factory running successfully. The pizza place closure is presented as a recent loss that people are still processing. However, later in the movie, Hunt is shown eating pizza that appears to come from a local pizzeria. The pizza isn't from a national chain or a frozen dinner. It's in the type of box you'd expect from a neighborhood pizza place, and the context of the scene suggests it's locally sourced. Sharp-eyed viewers have pointed out this contradiction for years. If the local pizza place closed yesterday, where exactly is this pizza coming from? There are a few possible explanations. Perhaps there were 2 pizza places in town and only one closed, though the dialogue doesn't suggest this. Maybe the pizza is from a neighboring town, though again, nothing in the scene indicates this. Most likely, this is simply a continuity error where the screenwriter or script supervisor didn't catch the contradiction between the earlier dialogue and the later visual element. Act 15. Journey's keyboardist wrote the Australian theme song. The song, Working Class Man, has an interesting backstory that connects Australian rock music to one of America's most successful bands of the 1980s. Jimmy Barnes, who was already a major star in Australia through his work with the band Cold Chisel, was looking for material for his solo career when he came across a song written by Jonathan Cain. At that time, Cain was the keyboardist for Journey, the American rock band behind massive hits like Don't Stop Believin' and Open Arms. Cain had written Working Class Man, but Journey hadn't recorded it, leaving the song available for other artists. Barnes heard the demo and immediately connected with the lyrics about blue-collar struggles and working-class pride. He recorded his own version, bringing his distinctive, raspy vocal style to the track. When the song was included in the Gung Ho soundtrack, it was already climbing the Australian charts, which eventually led to the film being retitled Working Class Man in Australia and New Zealand. The song became Barnes's signature solo track and one of the most recognizable rock anthems in Australian music history. It's still played at sporting events and working-class celebrations across Australia decades later. Interestingly, despite being written by a member of one of America's biggest rock bands and appearing in an American film, Working Class Man never charted in the United States. American audiences simply didn't connect with the song the way Australians did. The track remains a perfect example of how a piece of music can have completely different cultural meanings and commercial success in different countries, even when it's part of the same film.